Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Check Drop. Today is the 30th of November. I hope everybody had an amazing Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and now right back into it. So let's just dive right in. My guest tonight is a very talented musician and comedian who has been seen on NBC's Last Comic Standing, The Howard Stern Show, and is currently working for the Bob and Tom Comedy Show. Please welcome to the Check Drop, Mr. Pat Godwin. What's up, Pat?
Hi, Chuck.
How are you, sir?
I call you Chuckles all the time.
Yes, you do.
And me and about maybe 30 other people.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, it's fitting in the comedy business, I guess. For a split second when I thought about when I started Summit Comedy, that I was going to be like Chuckles, and I was like, I just can't do it.
Yeah, you can't do it. That was a cutesy email thing between you and I.
Yeah, it's too cheesy. And plus, wasn't there like a Chuckles comedy or something in Florida?
Well, I think it's always the joke comedy club. Like I was working at Chuckles. I don't think there was an actual Chuckles.
Yeah, but then there was Giggles for a while. I don't know if the Giggles.
So there was an actual Giggles in Germantown outside of Milwaukee. Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't there a Giggles based in Florida too, like a chain?
I think there was. Yeah.
And I always kind of thought that was kind of a joke, and like, oh wait, they're serious.
There's a lot of bad names, and the owners of those clubs get very annoyed when you point them out.
Well, let's run them down right now.
Side Splitters, the Looney Bin. But you go there and then you befriend these people. You don't think about how terrible the name is.
Right.
Of mental illness, the Looney Bin.
The funny bones.
Yeah.
Like what hasn't been taken? I've thought about that before. Like what hasn't been taken? There's
there was Sir Laughs a lot, and I think that was in Missouri. I remember getting that gig and going, oh boy.
Well, the whole concept, and I remember like when I left the Comedy Zone and started Summit. I mean, no disrespect to the Comedy Zone or any other chain that has a franchise name. I always just thought like, you're not paying for the name, you're paying for the comedy. If you have good comedy, you can call it whatever the hell you want. So it's simple as that. So I thought it was a unique, I guess something like the Improv has a little bit more weight to the name and such than most. But even that, if you can still bring shit acts to the Improv and people will have a bad taste in the mouth for comedy. So, I had the whole concept of just that, like, it doesn't matter. Just bring good comics and you can call it, the Stardome Comedy Club or whatever.
I remember Lisa Lampanelli went on the Tonight Show and she was telling Jay where she was working, and she said she was at Side Splitters in Tampa, and just Jay, he really, and Bobby Jewell, the owner, was not happy. I remember him showing me the clip and being mad, and I thought, well, boy, he takes pride in the name of the club.
Yeah.
But it was just Jay, just kind of goofing around.
Well, you would think a comedy club owner too would have a sense of humor.
Yeah, and he really does. It's just not about the product itself, the name of his club. Everything else he has.
Don't make fun of my name. Yeah, well, I don't think.
And Lisa joined in, and I remember that Bobby was none too happy that she was playing along, and her job is to play along.
Yeah.
She's doing improv basically. It's yes and. It's not no, you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, I guess the hindsight. Maybe you should have named it that. I think you knew, like, again, why I didn't name Chuckles.
Yeah.
I mean, you just knew that that's going to open up a pile of jokes on the back end. So
right.
That's all right.
The Comedy Zone where we started, that was take off on the Twilight Zone, and I just that's pretty cool actually.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's where we met. So for people that are watching that don't know the history of me and Pat Godwin, I started in the comedy business fresh after college, and I remember weren't you? So let me think about this. Weren't you managed by the Comedies or Creative Entertainment briefly?
Yeah, and right before that, Roger Paul and Tom Haynes were talking. Hey, we're doing this Final Four thing, 1994 downtown, where they built a Comedy Zone. Joel Pace was behind the bar. Brian Heffron was behind those guys were just starting off with the Comedy Zone also. And they had me do these marathon things from 3:00 in the afternoon, or maybe we started at 1 till 2:00 in the morning, where people just walked in and out. And they hired me just to do comedy. And I just basically stood up there and just, it was like behind the chicken wire, And those guys saw me like kind of handless, but I had no act. I just started to improvise and goof around. Roger Paul and Tom Haynes called me up and said, hey, would you do this? And when you get offered a job, you just say yes, and then you figure out how to do it later.
Right.
So sometimes.
So how did you get that job? You just said you didn't have an act. Were you not a regular stand-up comedian at the time?
No, I wasn't. I was actually on a radio show, WMMR in Philadelphia, and we all got fired. And I was, going through a divorce, because that's what I always do every couple of years. And it was
to keep the material fresh, right?
But I was doing Fridays and Saturdays. But what I would do is I honestly just had songs from the radio. I had no segues, and I wasn't improvising at that time. I was working hard as a morning radio guy, pumping out original songs and parody songs. But I worked on the weekend, and people just were so much, they were fans of the show. They would just yell stuff out from the show, and I would sing it. When we got fired, I was forced by necessity to go out and make a living and actually learn how to do it. And the Comedy Zone is the only reason why I was offered that opportunity. I stood up there, I improvised, I goofed around, and I made people laugh. And Joel and those guys, and Brian, we call him Half, obviously, and Brad at that time, the guy in charge, Brad Greenberg, they said, hey, offer this guy the book. Because we had other comedians that Brad would just go on. That we had like round the clock acts. But I ended up like being the only one at the end. I'm not going to mention the names of other people that were working there. But, really, Carrot Top will come in and hang out. He didn't have to perform in that environment. It was rough. I mean, it was the Final Four, downtown Charlotte, 1994. My first road gig. And they opened up the book to me. And you remember how much work there was back then.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to remember, like, who made that first call? Was it Tom or was it Brad that said, "Hey, you know what? We think that you can pull off some comedy."
Haynes called Roger Paul, and then Roger sent me down, and then Tom and I just became instant buddies. And then Brad ended up managing me, and Carrot Top left shortly thereafter, and so did Rodney, I think. So it was an awkward time.
Yeah, so at the time, I believe they were managing
Rodney Carrington, of course.
Rodney Carrington, Pat Godwin, and Carrot Top
was managed by them for a while too, I think.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
I want to say there was a Charlotte comedian. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. Kevin Hughes. That's it. Yeah. I think they're managing like that small handful, which, I mean, obviously it's pretty.
Well, I was offered all the work in the world, and it meant a lot to me because then Yankee from Philadelphia went down into the Southern one-nighters. Those shows could have been anywhere sometimes, and also really good places most of the time.
Right.
So you got every aspect of that education. You were at that Jacksonville room that set up great. Then you're, God knows where on a Monday, well, at some country bar. And I remember making fun of the Southern accent. Somebody said their name was Sharon. She's Sharon, and I remember going Sharon and thinking that was funny to me. Lost the whole crowd. They hated me, and I went, "What did I do wrong?" Oh,
play to the room.
That's what I did wrong. I'm a snotty Yankee making fun of a Southern accent, and the next day I didn't do that.
Joel Pace said they fired everybody but Pat. That's what it says. I think Carrot Top left. I think his star. He had a little rocket ship kind of boosting his career.
He was on fire. I mean, he was killing those colleges, and you know how lucrative that can be at that level that he was at that time. He ended up leaving, and it was just, I remember it really rocked everybody's boat.
Well, yeah, that's why I started Summit Comedy, because I was the last one hired before that fella took off.
You were kind of in the same situation that I was. You were a newbie on an established ship that was starting to go to the left a little bit.
Right. Well, if you said that was 94, I started in July or August of 95. So I graduated. I graduated in May from college that year in 95. So literally, I just remember like meeting you in the hallway, and then and then they were like, "Hey, here's the guy that you need to start booking for colleges," because that's why they had booked me. Because like, hey, this kid's fresh out of college, like he can book Carrot Top into some colleges, and he knows these college kids, and That's literally how I got started, which is kind of smart on there.
Oh, you weren't booking any features or MCs or
no,
stuff? No, college guy.
At that time, was strictly colleges. When
I didn't know that.
Yeah, for a year and a half, and then once Scott left, they did some shuffling because Tom Haynes left, remember? And then Hef started booking all the headliners, and that's when I started booking all the features. So
I think Jeff Chester was doing the features at that time. Of course, we call them middle acts back on the East Coast.
It was just a progressive scenario. Like, everybody kept either leaving or whatever, and then I kept moving up the ranks.
But it was an ambitious place. I mean, there were a lot of people that worked there.
Yeah, it was.
You had your accounting. You had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I learned a lot about this business, and I learned a lot not what to do when I worked there too. But that's a whole different story. But like I was very grateful for the lessons learned, and that propelled me into. I was 26 years old when I started Summit, so I was like, all right, let's do it. So
it's funny when people say, when people say, "Oh, you work for the Comedy Zone," do you know? Do you actually know Chuck Johnson? Yeah, I know Chuck Johnson. You talked to Hef? Yes, I talked to Hef.
Like even now?
Yeah,
they say that?
I haven't talked to him in a while, only because my life with radio and all this has changed. I haven't been down in Charlotte in a long time. It's been a while.
Well, let's segue into that. So you're one of the lucky people that you have a job being a comedian, but also during the COVID year of 2020 that you are working on a regular basis, but it's in radio, correct?
Yeah, I'm on Bob and Tom full time. That started 2 years ago, and that was a gradual process. After Bob retired, Josh Arnold came on board as a full-time member, and Tom was just starting to have me on a lot. And we were writing together. I would bring all these things to the table. He would edit them. And I wasn't really used to working with anybody like that, but it really was a pretty cool relationship creatively. So, he said, "Hey, why don't you come in tomorrow?" In the beginning, it was like 7 to 9, and he would he'd make sure that, maybe he'd throw me a couple bucks as a friend. And I go, "Oh, you don't need to do that." And I didn't realize what was happening. I was about to be, and then Tom said, "Hey, why don't you come in from 6 to 10? And even at that moment, I didn't really know what was going on because I still had outside gigs. It just sort of happened,
Well, most comedians, they get asked to be on there and such. They're not looking for compensation. They're just looking like, hey, this is just a plug to help me plug wherever I'm going next week or whatever and such. So that was obviously.
Oh, well, it was the Tonight Show for comedians for a long, long time, and still can be. We don't have live guests on. It's just the nucleus. I mean.
Okay.
Of the group that's allowed in the studio. We will have like Roy Wood, of course, on and do a Zoom thing. Jimmy Pardo, Kostaki, of course, our buddy Economop. That's hard to say.
Yeah, he was on the podcast a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he's on with us every Tuesday. He'll be on tomorrow, and so we're all really rising to the occasion. I've always been a fan of the show and the fact that they did interesting music to me, like Haywood Banks and Henry Phillips, Tim Cavanaugh. These guys were doing creative things based on the show, original ideas, and it just was better than the normal road kind of musical comedy. It really had some substance to it. So I always loved being on the show, and I've been on like 6 or 7 of their best of albums with things that I was really proud of, like C'est La Vie and Legend of John Fox, and really different kind of things, as opposed to the normal musical comedy fare that the road is and can be sometimes.
Did you get your full-time job with them pre-COVID, or was it just?
Oh, it was pre-COVID. It was like 2 years ago. Yeah, it was just this last March that everything got shut down. I was home for a month and zooming from the house with the delay, which was just so difficult. People, Tom was really worried about. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, it was just coming at us from all directions.
Right.
People in our circle, people that we knew getting sick, and so because my son's mom is a nurse, they thought, oh boy, let's just keep him home for a while. Then now I came back in, and I'm like in a separate room right behind the main studio. I see them all. I'm behind the glass. Christy Lee, who's our news person, is to the right of me behind the glass. And then Tom's in there, Chicken, and Josh, but they're all like 8 feet apart.
Yeah, I used to listen to the show when it was in Charlotte.
Yeah, 106.5 there.
Yeah, and then it just disappeared one day. And
well, that's the way syndicated radio is. And things change. We're in a lot of markets right now, but you do hear about you would have a fan base like in
Yeah.
Charlotte from that show, and then it up and disappeared. Yeah, they were there for a while.
Yeah, and we get so many transplants too. I got a new guy in my golf league that just came down, just moved in from Iowa, and he's like, "Oh man, I love Bob and Tom," and I was like, "Yeah, we used to get it here, and no longer." So if you ask like people from the South, they probably don't know who the hell they are, Robbie. But I know it's definitely a Midwest.
Well, they're in a lot of southern markets. It's just you can go into a West Virginia area and it's huge. Yeah. It's just it's like John Boy and Billy, obviously.
They've had this market and cornered for as long as I've been listening to the radio, and I don't listen to the radio anymore. So
they were instrumental in kind of helping me with the Comedy Zone too, because I had 2 or 3 bits that I knew worked for radio. Because I had done Howard Stern and done songs for that show before the 19 and around the 1994 stuff. In fact, the next 5 years, come to think of it. So when they allowed me in their studio and we had some fun, that really helped the Charlotte market. That was a good time. Those guys were, Billy West, they're nuts. They have a good time.
Yeah, I used to take the comedians, and I'm sure what I remember taking you to a radio one time, and I vividly remember we were going to. I think it was 95.1, and I just get out of the car. It's 6 a.m, and I'm tired. You're tired, and I get halfway across the parking lot, and you're standing in the back of my car. You're like, "Hello, Chuckles." He goes, "I need my act." You get so
the guitar has to come out of the car.
If you're just tuning in or just watching whatever, Pat Godwin he's a guitar act. So could you do it? Like, how much time could you do without a guitar? Because I know you do some stand up a little bit.
There's enormous amounts of time now where I talk and I talk and I talk. But the truth is, I kind of all lead it towards a musical moment. It can be a crutch at times. It can also be, thrilling that this guy was just talking about the stuff with maybe an audience member. Then boom, this song appears. Sometimes these songs are magic. In other words, I have a way I know, like the Springsteen bit. I know what I'm doing. I've done it a lot. And I just can, you know what I mean? It can be a magic trick. But then a lot of times, these things lead to things that I've written and it works out great. So I've had to do a lot of stuff without the guitar. And it's a little, it throws me a little bit right in the beginning. And then I'm kind of okay. Because I'm not used to, if you see Dennis Miller do stand-up, he clutches the mic stand. But what's coming out of his mouth is really good. Yeah. I would watch some tapes of me without the guitar, and it's obvious when I first started doing it, I don't know what to do with my hands. So I had to kind of learn because I've always had this thing on, and I kind of, whatever.
Yeah. Do you, obviously being a musician, do you, where do you see yourself now? Do you lean more towards the comedy side, like when you're writing material, or do you still ever just write real music? Real music.
The real music is easier if I'm sitting around. That's what if before the Bob and Tom show, that's what would come out first. Now I have these moments and I go, hey, I have to have 4 things for tomorrow. I don't need you right now. When I have to write serious songs again, or we'll get to that. Okay. But right now, so those things come to me a lot easier. And my favorite one is called When Did We Get Old, that we're going to end up recording. It's kind of a piano thing, and it's really cute and kind of, it's about this guy where did his life go? He's taking his daughter to the ballet class now. And that was a serious one that we're going to record in the studio that just came. That actually I wrote a year ago and just finished up a little bit ago. Those are easier to do than the comedy ones. Much easier.
Do you have any albums that you've done just of serious music?
Yeah, I have an album called Excess and Moderation from 1993. Okay.
All right. See, that was pre Chuckles. So
yeah. Well, I think being on the Morning Zoo, I was a little embarrassed about it because I didn't get as much of the original things as I wanted. I had a kind of a guy in charge who would go, hey, why don't you? He'd hear End of the Innocence by Don Henley, and why don't you do something to that? And he would just force the, and I go, oh yeah, what do I do? End of the Impetus, perfect. And I'd go, oh, I was just kidding. So I think that I really enjoy the fact that the Bob and Tom guys allow me, to kind of be myself. And if there's a parody that on a topical thing, we do it. But we really, it's a well-balanced diet,
Yeah. Well, Well, I assume because I play guitar as well too, so I've always kind of gravitated towards musical guitar acts, good ones. I mean, there's a lot. I've seen some shit ones over the years, but you were
Oh,
definitely.
I've had them open up for me. Sometimes the booker will make that mistake, and I say, no, 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 do your thing. Oh, they told me I can't play the guitar. And I said, no, you can play it. It doesn't matter. As a headliner, I'm, whatever you're going to do, don't worry about it. I've had that happen a lot.
Yeah, I think I might have done that once in my career, and I learned like, oh, you're not supposed to book two guitar acts on the same, or that's like having two ventriloquists or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
You gotta, it's just different. Like you learn these over the years of like being in a comedy world, and like there's a A plus B equals C scenario, and two guitar acts is not part of the equation.
I had someone who would close, they show up, and this is in Jacksonville. I'm not going to mention the name, but the person was saying, hey, I close to these tapes that, I sing along with, and it's very powerful. And I was told that I can't do that in front of you because it's just too powerful. I remember going, no, please.
No, please.
Close.
The door is open.
You are allowed. No, I'm going to get in trouble. I said, you're not going to get in trouble.
Oh man. So obviously, your career has changed so much then. So, I mean, even if you're back, like, say 94, you became a comedian, a musical comedian.
Yeah, I was fired by WMMR, the Morning Zoo. Or Stern, you have to understand.
Because you were for Howard Stern at one time.
Well, Philadelphia, I was on a show for 6 years in Philadelphia, and we were number one. We were Stern's first syndicated market, and it took him 2 or 3 years to then become number one. And then he did funeral parties for our lead guy, John DeBella. It was just 20,000 people would show up outside our studios. It was just a very insane rivalry,
And what city was that? Philly?
That was Philadelphia. Yeah, it was Howard Stern's first syndicated market. And then when we became number two, you can bill at a high rate. You're still a successful station and with a successful morning show. But our WMMR went nuts. And we all got fired, and they kept John DeBella. He did a thing called Sports Rock. And then I was just, I had nothing. And I wasn't exactly a guy who knew how to save. I bought tons of guitars and pianos and, all kinds. I wasn't thinking that it ever would end. And when it did, that's when I started to do Stern. And then you guys down in Charlotte. In the
you just defined every comedian on March 10th of this year.
Yeah, I know.
It's not going to end. These are the best things. Cruise ships are my life. Nothing's going to take away cruise ships.
Before Bob and Tom, I did 2.5, 3 years on the cruise ships after my divorce. It was hard being away from Jimmy. He was only 3, 4 at the time. He's now 10. And I couldn't believe how lucrative it was. And all my friends were just, they had homes and they had motorcycles.
What are these things you call assets?
And they had money in the bank, and they were helping me. And I worked for Royal Caribbean and Princess. But I tell you, it was hard because when you're going through divorce and you're seeing such beautiful things, and you're performing in theaters and clubs on Royal Caribbean, it's just weird to be doing that well and just being so miserable. I remember flying back. Geez, I'd fly back from Rome or wherever, all over the world, and I'd pick up Jimmy and Avery, his older sister who I adopted, and we'd be able to hang out for 3-4 days. Then, man, I was on 4 flights, meeting a ship in Belize or something. These people have no idea how really hard it is. And they enjoy the money, but it's very difficult work.
Right. I mean,
and now they're really just swinging in the wind. These poor people.
Yeah,
industry. I don't know how that industry is going to come back. Quickly, it's going to come back, but. Wow.
Well, I don't see it come back anytime soon. I mean, they will be obviously quickly once the vaccine comes out. I know that they're doing some trial cruises with asking for free guests to come on and so they can kind of move through the COVID measures and safety.
Well, I've heard that there's some of them are still having to move around for technical reasons because imagine just a gorgeous, $1 billion ship just sitting in water. I think things got to move around a little bit. I don't know how those people are staying. You've never seen people work harder in your life.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of the employees, like at least on the entertainment side, like the booking side, have been furloughed. So, because their job is to either book the talent or get the comedians from point A to point B, and they're not doing that right now. So
and the
a
people
lot of
on Carnival, I don't know. I don't imagine there's a harder working bunch of comedians than. I mean, you did a lot of shows. There are a couple of ships on Royal Caribbean where you also did a lot of shows, but there were other ones where you didn't do so many shows. But the people on Carnival, man, they were the worker bees of the industry.
Yeah, isn't it funny? Like with those cruise ships, that the more you got paid, for the bigger brands, the less shows you get. Whereas
Absolutely.
the Carnival, you're shelling out like in between 7 and 9 shows for a week, and they pay the least amount of the cruise ship market. So
and it still was good, and you got little bumps here and there, and there's management that came in and out. Friends of mine would come in and out. It was very challenging.
Yeah, and the staff, the everybody that's gone through that whole booking, I've seen a lot of not a lot of turnover, but I've seen the turnover over the years, and every person, like there's some like people that they're like friends of mine that I've done so much business with and such, and because I didn't get into the cruise ship market until about, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. I didn't. I just never opened up that arm, I guess, like as far as because it is very hard to get in. Because if you don't know those people, it's hard. So
it takes a certain really tough person, which I am not, that can really do that. Because on Carnival, there are tinier rooms, and even a room with a window, it still is really, really rough and lonely. And you're not really allowed to fraternize. And then some people just slip up, and you'd be getting off a ship at 6 o'clock and see. I saw a cruise director being let off because he was canoodling in the disco with a woman one night, and he was the cruise director. There are a lot of very strict rules on there, and people get lonely out there, and it's like they would get fired constantly, and then maybe some of them had come back. It was hard work.
Billy D. Washington says Carnival does not pay the least amount, so I'd be curious to know who does. So you don't have to put it out there, Billy, but yeah, it is what it is, and I just do feel bad.
Carnival actually it pays pretty good.
I do feel bad for everybody out there. I mean, obviously, this is our industry, this is our lifeline, and rising tides raise all ships, proverbial and literally. So,
some of my friends are also coming to me and telling me what they're really doing. Certain people are doing construction. They're friends of mine, and I was telling you, I got a buddy that moved back in with his ex-wife, and they're sort of freshly divorced too, going through a divorce and stuff, and he's back in there with her. They lead sort of separate lives, but I thought, man, that's what it's come down to.
That is a very nice woman that allows them to back.
She is a nice woman.
Yeah, I assume he's
a good guy too.
You said they have kids?
No, they don't have kids. No.
Oh, that's even more of a nicer woman, because I could understand it more so if there was kids. Like, all right, at least you can have the family unit even.
Well, I'll tell you what, my ex-wife wouldn't let me move back in with her.
So you have a lot of ex-wives, don't you?
No, I only have 2. I just, it's good for comedy to come off like a big old loser.
I always, like, in my mind, you had like 3 all named Kim.
Oh, there are 5 all named Kim. The first person who I had relations with in high school was a Kim, and I only really had one other relationship with a woman who wasn't Kim, and that was Ann back in Philadelphia. I married 2 Kims. And I even got a Kim tattoo. You remember Miami Kim?
I can't keep up.
Well, you and I went out to always be at the comedy club, and you and I would go to a diner afterwards. You had late night dinners with us after many shows.
Right.
She would travel with me for a while. Her name was Kim. So I get Kim tattooed on my arm because she got Patrick on her ankle. I'm like, I don't even like tattoos, but I had to do it. So I got like cursive Kim on my shoulder. We broke up, and so I covered that up, and then I met Jimmy's mom, whose name is Kim. I could have just left it there.
Does it say somewhere in your online profile, like, only dates Kims or something?
No.
Are you meeting these people?
I have deep psychological problems, or somebody said to me he's dated more Kims than a Chinese phone book. So
my brain already went to the Asian joke, but I didn't want to throw it out.
It's always said on Bob and Tom. We're not being racist about it. It's just for some reason it's true. I don't know how it's happened. And the only 2 people I dated after my divorce for a while were also 2 Kims. So maybe I need to sit.
Jesus. Yeah,
Sit on
like
the couch somewhere.
I think you just need to know the next time somebody comes around and say, "Is your name Kim?" She says yes. Turn around and walk away.
Well, it's never been the Kim's fault. It's always been my fault. So I don't blame any of
Well,
the
there we go.
seriously.
Time to look within.
Yeah, I don't. If someone were named Kim right now, who I fancied, I would not. It wouldn't be her name or her. That's the problem.
Got it. Well, it sounds like you need some self-reflecting on.
Well, I've had plenty of self-reflecting.
So have you
done?
have you done any live shows this year?
I just did one on Saturday in Anderson, Indiana. My first time back was outdoors in August, and I had to look at the game film. I was nervous 3 days before, because I remember one time when I first started out, I had a shoulder injury and I couldn't really hold the guitar for a month. They were about to do surgery. They didn't. I only had 1 month off. I was living in Miami, and I went to do a show in Sanibel, Florida. And I didn't think that I'd been on the road forever, and I thought, and the first time I got up on stage after a month off, I forgot everything, and it terrified me. So the next day, I spent the whole day looking at old videos. So this time I was prepared. A week before, I'm listening to live albums, anything I can find just to get all the segues. I tried things and I went, oh God, it's not there. But caring about the product, then driving down to that, it was in Sullivan, Indiana, and I was terrified. I hadn't been on stage since March. And I'm a kind of a guy who always liked being on stage a lot, because you don't seem to lose your fastball at all when you're on stage a lot. And I got down in Sullivan, and it all came back. Things that they were even yelling out. I went, all right, and it was there. And I'm like, that's only because I thought about it a lot. I really was concerned.
Was it a venue that was like half capacity, or did they not care, or like how does
it was half capacity? Yeah, it was like a benefit thing, but I mean, it was everything that was allowed, which still was just spotty.
Allowed that week, right? It changes.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean,
it literally changes every day.
I just did a show in Illinois where I get there and the owner goes, hey, Illinois is only allowing 25 people to show. I'm like, all right. So if you wouldn't mind coming down on the money a little bit. And I'm like, oh, boy. That would have been nice to know before I drove there. Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of that myself, where like it's bananas. I mean, I just booked a show last week for February, and it was in Montana. And then they just came back 2 days later and pissed off, saying that they couldn't do it now or whatever. Yeah. So it's like, all right, I'm used to it now. It's like, it's like 3 steps forward, 18 steps backwards. So.
No, I've had a lot of that. I mean, people will just go, when you get the email, hey, what do you think if things are changing here in this state? Why don't we postpone it? And to be honest with you, everybody's always worked with me in the past, and I think comedians should work with any situation. You got to go, yeah, if you think you know your business better than I do, then we should postpone that,
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
You just got to give them, if they're asking you that, that's obviously they booked this, but that's kind of their feeling.
Right. And then you're like, I'll talk to you a week out and then we'll see how this goes. See if you're still on the same page.
Yeah, I've had things cancel, week of, and it's no one's fault. It's just the way it is.
I had a show, get this, I had a show last week, 2 weeks ago. It was a virtual show, and they canceled the virtual show. I was like, how do you cancel a virtual show? They only said that it was at a college, and they said only 2 people had signed up. I was like, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. I was like, if that comedian had flown to that place to try to perform live and 2 people showed up, you would have handed them a check and said, I'm sorry, and let them walk away. But yeah, I've had actually 2 virtual shows canceled. One was, there was a hurricane in Texas, and I let them off the hook. But this other one,
you and I have the best story. Whenever comedians tell their stories, like, hey, I did a show for 9 people. You and I just kind of go, well, let me tell you a story.
Hey, that's going to be the closer. I'm gonna let you close out with that. That's the check drop story. I'm gonna let you close.
To this day, I just let them talk. Oh, was it only 3 people?
I can't wait. If you're watching or listening, it's gonna be the build up. Pat and I have a really good story, and
no one can even come close to this story.
Yeah, like the Hell Gig story,
can't beat this story.
Well, okay, that's deep, but
Well,
yeah,
no,
it's a
COVID
pretty
comedy. I mean,
it's a pretty good story, and like, and I always tell it wrong, I think. So it's always best to hear it from the
well,
comedian's
you
mouth.
got the frantic phone call from me, so
Well, I get a lot of those.
oh, I could never do what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm not jaded yet, because everybody says, after like 10 years, you're gonna be jaded and you're not gonna want to do this anymore. And I actually still like my job, which is, I mean, I've been doing this 25 years. I mean, 3 years with the Comedy Zone, and 22, almost 22 and a half for Summit. And yeah.
Well, on your end, I have, as an adult, married, Jimmy, I think is 2 or 3 at the time, and I'm driving to Hilton Head to work for my buddy John Biddle down there, and my the whole rim on my Pathfinder just explodes, and I had money to get there, and now I've got the situation, and John Biddle somehow called Ron Schock, who's the late great Ron Schock, whose wife had an Amex card. And they were able to, I think it was $1,100 to fix this horrible the axle and wheel that exploded. And I got there on, like, it was just out of a movie with 20 minutes to spare. And because John said he would go, with out of the money I was getting, he would make it all, and we made it happen somehow. But imagine getting that phone call, which you've gotten many times probably. Hey,
I've gotten so many of them. Like I've from like, hey, your comedian just threw a TV out the window. Those are fun too. Drugs and alcohol in excess are bad. So
being on the road and lonely and all that stupidity. I remember walking into a guy that had a house for the comedy club, and it was like, no TV. There's no TV here. Well, we had a thing last week. We're getting a TV, and I thought, well, he's not telling me. You poke around, then you find out the real story.
Yeah, you look.
He was mad and stole the TV.
You see on the marquee from last week who was there, and like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. Like, who was here last week? Yeah, got it. Yep. Yeah, the comedy condos. I mean, I've never been in, like, I've been in a couple, I guess, per se, but I've never stayed in. I've visited some, like to visit a comedian, but yeah, I can't imagine the shit stories that you guys and the horror stories of like just the shittiest places that they've been put up. What's your worst like comedy condo or shittiest hotel story that you have?
Oh, I'll get in trouble because
no, you won't. You don't have to tell who. This is what these interviews are for, Pat.
Well,
the people want to know.
This isn't the crappiest one of all time by any means, but I do remember working for the Comedy Zone in their first condo. I was going to do radio on Tuesday, so they had me come in early in the Monday. But Monday was a specific night at the club, and I said, okay, well, I guess still stay anywhere. Yeah, and I think that everybody's real nice. They didn't want me paying for a hotel, or they said, well, yeah, we'll find some place for you. And I'm fine. I was fine with that. I was a newbie, and I was, it was just kind of exciting until I actually got to the condo. I had a long drive from Philly. It was like packed with people, and I had radio the next morning. I remember going, oh my God, what have I got myself? And they wouldn't even let me in because the guy who answered the door wasn't aware of what was going on, and I'm like, oh my God.
Were they comedians or just happened to be staying there?
Comedians and hanger-ons and hanger-on. I think we ended up having to call Joel to figure out how to get into the apartment.
Yeah, I remember those. I don't know if it's the same one, but I remember the condo that was literally right across the street from East Meck High School, which I had gone there. So
the one in Charlotte.
Yeah, originally, and then they moved over to a hotel down the road on Independence.
There's a great club in Nashville. You're well aware of it, Zanies. But in the early days of Zanies, did you ever hear about this?
No. It
was the bartender lived upstairs, and there were like the cook would be on the couch, and it was when Lenny kind of ran it, and it was legendarily bad and scary. And I won't mention the nutty things that went on there because some of them were highly illegal, and it was it was kind of it was sort of scary for a while there, and then buddies of mine took it over, and they had that system in place for a while, but then they got rid of that house and made it a much better situation. But I remember that being a really rough one that a lot of people still talk about. I mean, it was if you talk to Jimmy Schubert or any of the guys that would do Zanies back at that time, that house was sort of scary.
Yeah, I can't, again, I can't imagine, just kind of a clean guy anyways though, so I can't imagine going into another condo that, I like, again, like in the fridge, like you always hear the horror stories, like don't ever touch the mayonnaise.
All true.
Or
you honestly had
let your mind wander, people. Like just don't.
You had to think of it like you were at war, and you had to have a different mentality. You had to give up any sense of, I'm a neat guy. I take a lot of showers. I don't get that many colds. So, dirty, God knows what's happened here. You walked in there and you gave up. In regards to if you're going to worry about it, it's going to drive you nuts. Yeah. Just do your job, do the best job you can possibly do. Get out of there during the day, come back as little as possible. And you honestly had to treat it like you were at war. Otherwise, it would drive you mad because some of the situations were really good and many were horrible,
Yeah. Crazy, man. Well, I did see on your bio that you have a birthday coming up, December 15th.
Yes.
It's exciting. No,
it's not exciting. It's sad.
Will you give your age or do you not want to?
Oh, it's going to be a big one, so I prefer not to.
Okay, got it. All right. So
I am in my very late. I'm 97 years old. So.
Well, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, like I said, you started.
I've been on stage since I was 22. I haven't had another job.
So you were in bands, I assume, before you got into the radio aspect, right?
I was more of a solo guy. I had a couple of bands, and I didn't like that as much as I would do all original music, and then the last set I would do like Beatles or whatever would get the crowd rocking. I did not do American Pie, and then I would. That's how I operated for a while. I did all original music. I was sort of like the patron saint of original songs, and I had a record out called Circle City, and that's all.
You ever signed with anyone, like any recording?
Yeah, I signed with Blood Records and Generic Records out of Wilkes-Barre, and then Blood Records out of Philadelphia that had a kind of a distribution deal with Warner Brothers. And boy, they put a lot of money into stuff, and we did not. We got radio airplay, but just like kind of an Eastern thing.
Those are two very comical names. Like
oh no,
blood. I'm like, you just signed away your life, and Generic is just obviously we're just gonna call this Generic.
Well, that was just kind of a joke. I mean, you have to understand, I was starting to write stuff in the early '80s, and it was still new wavy, and everybody had kind of goofy indie kind of names. Yeah. So this guy Craig Bevins started a record company called Generic. And the one in Philadelphia he was an actual lawyer, Ken Jacobson, who started Blood Records, and we put a couple of things out, and we gave it our all. I went all around the country promoting it, and this was serious music. The problem was that I was kind of funny in between songs. Then I would do these really dark, moody, melodic kind of things that didn't fit.
This is the end.
Well, do you know that it's Todd Glass? Darker than that. Todd Glass was the one. Do you know comedian Todd Glass?
Yeah.
He used to go watch me perform at Smokey Joe's. And here's what he actually said to me. I would do 3 sets of original music, but I'd be funny in between just because these are college kids. I had to get their attention. And then that last set, I'd do an impression or two, or just Beatles songs, Billy Joel, whatever. And Todd came all the time to watch me perform. And
what city was that?
It was Philadelphia.
Okay.
It was Wednesday nights at Smokey Joe's on 40th and Walnut in Philly. Todd Glass is just a Philly comic, and he befriended me. He was really nice, and he was all about comedy. He even would open up a couple times, and I thought he was great. He had great presence, and he was wacky. He still is to this day.
Oh yeah.
But he took me aside and he goes, your songs are really good, but you might be a comedian. You're so entertaining in between those songs you do, which I remember being really offended. And, he's my buddy. But I went, what? No. I meant this as a compliment. Just do one open mic. And Todd Glass took me down to the Comedy Works first, but the guy saw the guitar and actually said this. We have enough guitar guys, go across the street. And this was Todd's club, so he felt bad. But he took me across the street to the Comedy Factory outlet, where I did my little shtick. I just strung a couple of impressions together. And I ended up getting that radio gig like that because the owner took a tape to the morning guy and said, "Hey, listen to these voices." And I think I just did Prince, Tom Petty, Billy Joel, Springsteen, whatever was popular at the time, strung them in a row. Nothing funny about it. Hey, there's this guy. Doesn't he sound a little nasal? I would do Tom Petty. And it killed, though. You know how everybody can kind of kill at the beginning, and then you have to learn. But I mean, I remember doing the voices and people enjoying it. It was an easy club, though. And that's how it started for me. Todd was right.
So you owe Todd everything.
Todd is totally responsible for all this. I swear to God. He said, you know, you're really
what year was this?
It would have been
93.
89.
Oh, wow, earlier. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
88 or 89. And
so
I got that radio gig like instantly.
Any of that material that you started, like say your first couple of years of you know, learning to be a stand-up that are still in the bag that you still, they're tried and true that you still use?
I could still, if you asked me, if I were at a radio station, people will ask me, "Hey, I saw you do a Prince back in 1990," and all it was Prince doing a Christmas song. You know, let's make it rather
Christmas tree.
I
remember.
Yeah, I mean, if someone, I would. That was from 1989.
I do remember all those though. I mean, because it's like a Brian Regan joke. You just know, like a cup of dirt. You know, big yellow one's the sun. You know, so those are your songs. I remember that. To this day, like I'll hear a song, like say like the Barney song, and I still know the Barney song that you have, and I'm like, oh my God, like
yeah, that's
my brain goes to it.
Yeah, that's one that I was rather proud of because it was an original PP song, and I really enjoyed that melody. I tried to take it, you know, and I tried to grow as I went along. And I think the Bono Does Bingo I had from '89 because that was an original melody of mine, but it was like Bono taking the kid song and making it sound special, which has, you know, that kind of bit's been done, you know, by other. Jim Brewer takes the kid song and makes it whatever, Metallica or
Heavy
whatever.
Metal,
yeah. And but I still could probably do that if somebody asked me. And don't get me wrong, they do. In fact, Tom on the Bob and Tom show, a Bono thing came up, and he remembered that from the first time I did their show. And I was like,
he's probably got it on.
Jump into it, go. I don't even know how it goes.
He's probably got a cart. You know, do they still have those carts, those digital carts?
No. Things have changed drastically, to say the least.
You know, my broadcast production years, I remember. That was my degree in college, broadcast production. So, I'm using it right now. I'm using this degree.
They look like little 8-tracks.
Right. And then you just press you record the
and they would,
the commercials on the carts.
And they were very faulty. They would always.
Yeah, they're like an 8-track.
Yeah, exactly. I remember my first radio gig, they would be thrown at each other because we had a very volatile situation where I remember things being thrown around all the time. Crazy.
Yeah, I was a DJ in college. That was we had to do that for a semester. That was part of our requirement. And I was DJ CJ. Yeah, that was me. So
DJ what?
DJ CJ.
Oh.
Yeah, you know.
I like that.
So but I just remember like nobody listened, and I just remember like I would ask like, "Hey, request," and like, call in for requests, and nobody would do it. And I'd finally just said, "All right, if nobody calls me, because I'm trying to stay awake, right?" I don't remember what time it was, whatever. I actually had a day shift at least, but still, you get bored, you know, sitting there like nobody's calling you or whatever. And I remember saying like, if somebody doesn't call me within the next 30 seconds, I'm gonna start playing shit that your parents listen to, and then the phone's just lit up. I'm like, oh, all right, cool.
You may find you might find this funny that our drugstore where we can get anything, you know, if Jimmy says, "Hey, what's an almond joy like?" Or I'll go, "Well, I can go down the street and get it for you right now." So this just happened 2 nights ago. Jimmy and I go to get popcorn that we're going to make back here. I don't have this place stocked because I don't know what I'm doing, but I try my best. Dad, we can make some popcorn. I go, I don't have any of that, but it's right down here. So I go to the CVS here in the corner.
Yeah.
And he's on the iPad. And I go, "You got to come in now." He goes, "No, just let me stay in the car." He's 10 now. So I go, "Yeah, but don't touch anything. Okay." And I had the radio on. And it's the radio station I work for.
Okay.
Which is our home station is classic rock. So I go in and I'm like in line a little longer, and I'm, you know, making sure Jimmy's okay. I'm texting, "Yeah, everything okay? Yeah, don't get out of the car." And it's like a while, like in line, just getting, you know, popcorn and some sodas. And I get back in the car, and I guess I had the radio up a little too loud. And Jimmy goes, my gosh, don't ever leave me in the car with that crap music on for that long. And I said, you mean the station that I work for?
That pays for
And he goes,
these
oh, I'm
almond
sorry,
joys?
your voice just got weird. Is mine getting weird too?
No, I can hear you. You're like, hey, this is the station that pays for this almond joy, buddy.
Your voice, if I can't respond, it's only because your voice is going Darth Vader on me.
Okay, well, I can hear you perfectly, and that's.
I can hear you. I'm reading your lips now.
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, hopefully that'll go away soon.
Okay,
it's still not going away. I'm sorry.
That's all right. You know that Pat Godwin is on his iPhone. When we asked him to get in on a laptop, he bullied me and he said, "No, I'm not getting on a laptop. I'm going to get on a
not say that
iPhone."
Now. Actually, it's still doing that same thing, and I hope it goes away soon.
All right. Well, let's segue. So so being a
I honestly can't hear the question at all. So I'm sorry.
All right.
Hope this went away. This happened to us before we started, and it went away.
Yes, I'll just keep talking until you can possibly hear me, because I can hear you fine.
That's
Does anybody in the chat want to say if they can hear me and or Pat?
Hopefully, Chuck. Let's see if it's. I'm sorry, Chuck.
That's all right, man.
It's getting a tad bit better. I mean, but it's still all really digitized.
I was gonna ask if you're being a.
If my penis is what?
No,
I can read your lips. And
not your penis. I was gonna ask about your son. That your son is obviously, being a single dad, and being a comedian on the road. Is that tough?
I'm only catching little bits and pieces, and I'm sorry. That probably everybody's really aggravated.
How about this? I'm going to remove you from the stream.
You want to what?
I'm going to remove you from the stream, and then you re-add. All right. Is that any better?
No. Darn
okay, how about you remove yourself and re-click on that link I sent to you?
What do I remove? I just push the exit.
You just hit the your end or exit or whatever, and then come back in. So, all right, guys, technical difficulties. So if you are in the chat watching, thank you for being here on the check drop. If you have any questions for Pat, please throw them in the chat. I can throw them his way when he comes back on. So in the meantime, also, I see some people in here. Billy D. Washington, shout out to Billy. Love you. Want to get Billy on the show. I think you would be a great person to chat about what's going on in this COVID comedy world. I know you were big on the cruise ships and such, as well as clubs in the Texas area. So send me an email. I'd love to get you on the show. So while we're waiting for, if you're just tuning in, we are waiting for Pat to click back on with his technical difficulties here. So I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving and upcoming holiday season. It's going to be a fun one, isn't it? Can't be around your family or anything. Maybe that's actually good. Like some people, I think, might have had a better Thanksgiving knowing they weren't with their family.
Doing it.
So, hello, Pat. Pat, can you hear me now?
It's the same.
That's weird because everybody else can hear us.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You made a comeback.
Yeah.
Oh.
Roland Witt said he's making a sandwich.
Who's making the sandwich?
You.
Oh, no.
Well, what I was going to ask was being a single dad, on the road, that's got to be pretty tough, right?
It's the worst because it's like the best thing I've ever been a part of. And boy, again, I'm actually going to tear up if we talk about it. I hate being away from him. I have him 1 week and his mom has him 1 week and we do the e-learning thing. So I'm a very hands-on dad. So when I was going on the road pre-COVID, it was brutal being away from him. It was just the worst.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. I mean,
you have kids. I mean, you do stuff on the road where you've got to go out there and supervise and,
yeah,
you know what it's like. It's terrible.
I think last year I was gone I think it was 12 or 14 weeks weekends because I would do a lot of those NACA conferences and such.
Oh yeah.
And then I was really hitting the comedy festival pretty hard, like Montreal. I did the Atlanta, I did the Laughing one in LA, and yeah, it's tough. It's a grind. But my kid's a little older now, so my oldest is turning 19 in a few weeks, and my youngest is 16. So it gets easier, obviously, down the road when they're a little bit, a little self-sufficient. And I have the best support system with my wife. I mean, she's just amazing. So yeah, so I have that at least. So
I have my time like cut in half, and then comedy was taking the other part too. So I mean, right now is kind of a joy for me, even during these really difficult times, because I do see him a lot more now. And I remember, if it weren't for the iPad and FaceTiming and me having the iPhone on the road, and man, because you'd get to Venice and you'd find a restaurant, instead of it having good food, you look for something with good Wi-Fi, so I could look at my son, who was,
right.
4 at the time. That was my only goal, to get off the ship, and because a lot of times the Wi-Fi in the ship was terrible. You couldn't do any kind of video stuff.
Yeah. What is he? Do you let him listen to your comedy at all?
He comes on stage with me and does a blues song and the background vocals, which I have a song called Gangsta Folk that has background vocals on the original recording that Jimmy does. And we've kind of, it wasn't dirty in the first place, but we've sort of made it extraordinarily kid friendly. The rest of my act is not. I do, when Jimmy comes with me, I don't want the audience seeing me be so racy. So I don't soften it up attitude wise, but I'm aware of language more. But, Jimmy, he sees all kind of stuff, and he has to know what not to say around people. And I think, it wasn't the way I was raised,
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, most kids aren't being raised in the back of a comedy club. Do you let them watch the show, or do you put them in the green room with headphones on?
Well, no. He watches shows because he has to know his cue, because he doesn't know when he's going to come on. I just time it for the right moment. I used to have him sing in the background like he was interrupting the show, and that was a nice little gimmick. Then he would come up and just destroy. He's worked in front of 2,500 people in a Bob and Tom show, like just 2.5 years ago, in Mansfield, Ohio. He came up and he was like fearless. I think we gain fears as we get older. I don't know. I mean,
that was my next question. Does he get stage fright, or is he just all for it and like wants to jump out there? I ask him all the
time. He never stutters on stage or shows any sign of fear. And I ask him on the way home sometimes, did that make you nervous at all? He goes, the one time. He asked me to talk more all the time, and the one time we tried that, it went kind of weird.
Wow. What is he interested in going into the arts? I mean, what's
well, he's into animation and videos and stuff like that. He has no interest in picking up a guitar or a piano. He's incredibly funny, and I think that animation and art, like my brother James, he takes after him. I can barely write my name, and my son is just incredibly artistically talented and at it all day long. I mean, he's not just watching videos or playing games, which he does do, but he does animation and drawings and stuff like all day long. In fact, he gets in trouble because he's doodling during the e-learning, and doing all other kinds of stuff.
What would if he wanted to be a comedian and go into that field, what would you say?
Well, you'd have to tell them how rough it is, and you'd want better for them, because don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly proud of doing what I do, but it's not something that you just don't know what you're in for when you get out there, and then you're like, you've painted yourself into a corner, and it's really your only set of skills. So you go, well, I got to see this through.
Right.
Yeah. I played high school football, and I never quit. We had a tough bunch of people I played with, and that kind of has always stuck with me. And I haven't really finished this. I'm enjoying myself now more than I ever have, because I get up and I'm creative. I don't get up and I'm traveling, which drives me nuts. I'm actually like really in a joyful position of having to, really to do a lot of material.
Right. I mean, do you think with 2020 and the COVID scenario that it's going to crush a lot of people's, I guess halt them in their tracks as far as wanting to become a comedian? Like, I feel like we're going to be in a little supply and demand issue here shortly.
Well, absolutely.
Once everything comes back.
You're absolutely right, because I think the only way you don't get better on your own on the couch. I don't care how.
You just mentioned that one gig you started back, and like that comedy muscle hasn't been flexed. So you're weak. Your comedy muscle is weak. So
I've seen people that were just not very funny at all, and a year later, because they worked constantly, There are always people in this business that have surprised me. There have been people that opened for me, and you kind of go, and then you see them a year and a half or maybe 2 years later, and they have been on stage, and you go, "Oh, I love being surprised." That joy, and I will shout about that person to the rafters because that's what this is all about. I'll go, "Hey, this guy was terrible," and then boom, he's really good because he focused on it and he got on stage. I mean, it's really stage time is
well,
essential.
as a comedy agent, that's what I look for. That's what I pray that happens. There's so many shit acts that I've seen, and you're like, just that. You just explained it perfectly. Like, oh my gosh, I love that surprise where like, you're doing it, and you're doing it right. So
it happens, and isn't it nice when it happens? Because I think we're also used to the person who's been doing the same thing, and then you're okay, and everybody's guilty of it because you have to. Once you become a headliner, you have to kill.
Right.
So you're kind of like you have these bullet points, but it's great to see somebody who was terrible just come back and knock your socks off, and you just are in the back of the room going, "Holy crap!"
Yeah, because in this business, first impressions are huge. So I love it when that second impression is like, it's not that same, like, oh, there's that same bit you've been doing for 17 years and living off of it.
I remember going to LA and making a horrible impression the first time that I went out. I've been out there 3 times as an actor, singer, and a comedian. And I remember, I shouldn't have been on stage at the time. I just, sometimes you make a horrible first impression. And
right.
I've made all those mistakes.
Yeah. Well, hey man, we're a little over an hour now, so we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping this up. But I can't let you leave without telling the famous Chuck Johnson hell gig that you did for me at a college back in, I have to assume, 95, 96, 97 range, somewhere around there.
Yeah, you were working me a lot, and we had a lot of stuff going on, and we're all used to the cafeteria shows and the really tough ones, and we knew all about those. But I was on my way to Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, see, this is why I want you to tell it, because I don't remember all the notes like that, because I just did a show with them about a month ago.
Well, yeah, and that theater, if you guys were in that theater.
Well, it was a virtual show, so
okay.
Different
so
now.
This is in their theater, and you and I are like, yeah, this is great. Look at the money. Hey, look, hey, this is, and I'm driving down there. This is a good gig, and it was like, you had me do 3 or 4 of these. There were 3 or 4 in a row, and I remember driving down there. I remember getting in the hotel, and I'm supposed to show up a certain time. You remember how explicit our instructions were, and the time of the sound check, all that kind of stuff. And I show up at the theater, and I look at the poster on the theater. It's on the Friday. They had me promoted for the Friday night, not the Thursday night. I'm like, it's just a mistake at that poster. And I look at my thing. No, it's Thursday. I go, whoa. But, there's like nobody and it's like getting close to showtime. And, there was always a younger student activities person in charge of that budget and the book.
Right.
So it's
typically,
Allison. So I call Allison up. Hey, Allison, Pat Godwin here for the sound check. Excuse me. The show's tomorrow. I said, well, it's right here on our contract that I'm here tonight. She goes, oh, I'll be right there. And she rushed. I'm standing outside, and she rushes to the theater, and she'd already checked all her info, and she shows up. And she's like, oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. We have it promoted for tomorrow. It's going to be huge. Can you stay an extra day? I said, no. I showed her the other sheet.
I got Virginia Tech tomorrow.
I got a gig in Virginia Tech on the Friday. Oh, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. I guess the contract. I mean, you pay me and I go. I mean, I don't know what to do here. And she goes, she read over the contract and she goes, you got to do, it says you have to do an hour. I said, Allison, to who? And we get into the theater. Like I was going to where she had told me to be. The actual theater was open, and there was one student in there, and this person was studying, and I had gone to like the back door area. I was told to go to do the sound check. And
how many seats are in this theater?
Oh, it's a big theater, and we were
like
1,000 Friday night. Like it was one of those, it had to be 1,500 seat theater, college theater, like a high school auditorium, but bigger.
Got it.
And this one student is down there all by like third row, just like furiously studying in this little private space. And Allison, we go up and we're going to negotiate. I'm going, well, you can't do a show. And Allison's reading it all over. It says you have. I said, Allison, I mean, you promoted the wrong night. I think you got to pay me. And I don't know if, do you remember me making a phone call to you at that time, or was it? I think I made a phone call to you, Brian, and you said, well, the contract says, to pay you. I mean, you can't do a show for no one. I get off the phone. I'm pretty sure I made a call to you. And Allison is maybe, I don't know, maybe she's 22 for all I don't know. She was very young, and she is all freaked out. No, she's got to be 20, because here's what happened next. She goes, well, if you do an hour and I give you the check, I can't do anything else. I said, Allison, there's one person down there. Just plug in and do what I get. And I said, are you going to come down and sit down? And maybe we have two people. She goes, no, I have a test tomorrow. I'm going to sit up in the booth, and she's going to close the partition. And I went, okay. So we plugged in the guitar, and I looked at my watch. I said, she didn't even introduce me. It was just that, do an hour. And I walked on stage, and then I just started to sing. And I honestly tried to work that one student. I do recall that. I thought, well, let's see if I could pull this off. As I started, the person looked up and just shook their head, got up, got their books, and walked out. So I walked the guy within the first 3 minutes.
You walked 100% of the crowd.
100% of the crowd in the first 3 minutes. It was one person. I remember them walking up, shaking their heads like I was just an idiot. And I did an hour. I remember singing the alphabet at one time.
This is to an empty room.
Empty room. And Allison is behind the closed glass, and she's studying also. She's not paying any attention to me at all. And I remember just going, this is going to be one long hour. And I finished right at the nose. And I remember unplugging. I just could not believe it. Walked up. She says, thank you for doing that. And then she handed me the check. And I remember walking back to the hotel. I had never experienced, I didn't even know how to feel, because it wasn't my fault. I didn't
soul sucking.
It was, a show to nobody.
Let the record show that I did everything right.
You did everything right. I showed up on time. The school was at fault, but the contract did say 1 hour. You remember in those days it was clean, and it was 1 hour.
Right.
One person.
And you know what? When I started Summit Comedy, I created a Pat Godwin rule. It wasn't really a Pat Godwin rule, but in my mind, I changed every college show since then. I changed it to 50 minutes instead of 60, just for that reason. Just because, you know what? 60 minutes, 50 minutes is a good, amount of time. If the comedian wants to go longer and the people are involved, yes, but there's an escape plan. It was and I felt like I could get away with that with the contracts.
That's funny.
And it has worked. It's worked ever since.
It's an hour in a bad situation, and there were many of them.
Right.
That can really suck up a lot of material because you're rushing to get to the joke.
Right.
So it takes your actual 45 to 50 act, and you're doing a lot of dancing.
Yeah. So I switched. That was the Pat Godwin rule that I started, and at 50 minutes. And some schools cross that out and say, hey, we need 60, and that, it's okay. But it's also the same thing when we switch over to virtual shows. It's 30 minutes for those. So
longest hour of my life.
Yeah. Well, Pat, we'll leave it on that, man. I appreciate you coming on the Check Drop today and telling some good comedy stories and just catching up with you, man. It's been too long. It's been too long.
You too. Good luck to everybody out there.
Yeah, man. So if anybody out there listening need as a comedian for anything, summitcomedy.com, go there. You can book Pat for anything you want to, like when he wants to go back out on the road. So when that can happen again. So
when I'm allowed to.
Right. All right, Pat. Happy holidays to you. You already get your tree up, man. That's awesome. And we'll see you on the flip side, man.
Hi to your family for me.
I will, man. Take care. All right, everybody. See you next week.